What about the training you mentioned? The training of the auditor. That's really interesting. So how lengthy is that process?
It can take years.
I mean, one of that question I want to ask is, are people in Sea Org, like as an auditor, do you believe everything? How much is there a crisis of faith that creeps in? In religion, you have a crisis of faith when you start to wonder, like, does God even exist? So in this case, how often do you start to doubt that some of the core beliefs of Scientology are false?
Scientology would say that Scientology is not about beliefs. It's about an application of the techniques of Scientology auditing to improve someone's spiritual awareness and ability. So the belief level of Scientology is pretty much the stuff we've already discussed.
The effectiveness of the auditing process.
So the effectiveness of the auditing process, this is one of the things Hubbard says, is that standard Scientology, they call it the technology of how to deliver auditing, standard tech, works 100% of the time when applied 100% correctly. Well, that's kind of unfalsifiable, right?
Yeah.
Because anytime it doesn't work,
it wasn't applied correctly.
Exactly. That's a nice little escape hatch to pull on having a crisis of faith. But it didn't work. Well, then obviously it wasn't applied correctly.
Yeah.
That's where quality control comes in. Their job is to nitpick, and you can always find one thing that wasn't done correctly.
Communism didn't work because it wasn't implemented correctly. It's always an escape hatch with ideologies.
That's right.
Sure.
That's right. I would probably argue that auditors are not in a position of having many crises of faith, because actually they're usually seeing people, for the most part, improve in some ways through the process of auditing. Now, auditing can create like a state, somewhat of a euphoric state. You feel great. You're just blown out of your head. You know, you feel you're on top of the world. I've had that in some of my auditing.
As an auditor, sorry?
No, as a person receiving auditing.
Okay.
And so my point is, as an auditor doing a lot of auditing, you know, you're going to have someone in front of you called the pre-clear, is the person in front of you who's getting the auditing, called the PC or the pre-clear. They see over and over and over again these PCs having these sort of euphoric states and floating needles, and I feel great and fantastic. Oh, thanks, you saved my life, and da 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 da. Like, I've always said, if people didn't find Scientology helpful, nobody would ever stay in Scientology. Right. And so auditors are pretty much the ones doing the heavy lifting of what it even means to be a Scientologist. Those guys aren't the ones that you end up having crisis of faith. I mean, doing Scientology auditing, it doesn't require that you just have faith that you believe something. You just have to go through these motions. And Scientologists, one of the reasons Scientologists think this is all scientific is because it's like, I don't care if you believe why this works. I care how you feel at the end of an auditing session.
Mm-hmm. And empirically speaking, like anecdotal data it actually seems to improve people's lives within the context. So taking the outside world out of it, within this particular organization, you're actually measurably seeing improvement.
Yes.
Is that to some degree real? Because like if you look at a book like Animal Farm, where the pigs start to rule the other animals, and over time the life of the animals gets worse and worse and worse, while the pigs keep saying that it's actually getting better and better and better. Again, communism, same thing. The rationing is getting worse and worse and worse, less and less food, but there's constant reporting that there's more and more food. We're winning. #.
I would argue that what you've just described, it could be an identical description of what it feels like and what it means to go up Scientology's bridge to total freedom. Mm-hmm. You are reinforcing to yourself that everything's getting better and better and better, and you'd be like, you don't spend time with your family anymore.
Yeah.
You're broke, even though you make a lot of money. You're always stressed. You're at the beck and call of these people who seem to run your lives. Like, how a Scientologist feels about their own life is, it's very interesting to compare that to how that person's life looks to their non-Scientology family members. Mm-hmm. I get contacted by a lot of people who've never been in Scientology, mm-hmm. but they're like, I got a family member who's really deep, and can you help me understand some things? Why is this person's life like this? Why is this person's life like this? So I don't want to say that Scientologists do not actually, I don't want to say, oh, it's all in their heads. They think they're being helped, but they're really not. That doesn't feel honest, you know? But it's this thing where if Scientology was just getting auditing when you wanted, about the subjects you wanted, and you could take it or leave it, that would be fine. It's It's the fact that it's part and parcel to this entire organization and this entire experience that has, as a part of that experience, taking everything from you, demanding everything from you, controlling who you can speak with, controlling who you can have relationships with, who you have to erase from your life. This is where, and it's hard to place one pinpoint on this is where Scientology goes wrong. It's really hard to do that because the good parts of Scientology and the bad parts of Scientology are all just Scientology.
Yeah, so there's definition of what's bad for you, and it's probably in the beginning is bad for you. This almost just sounds like a template of a toxic relationship. There's a bunch of stuff in this world that are just not good for you. So the authoritarian says like, I'm just protecting you by blocking you off from those negative things, and they're probably they are probably negative things. But then this like this freedom starts closing in to where you can't no longer speak freely, think freely, act freely, and there's some. I mean, that's why sort of power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That person doing the controlling actually starts getting that like dopamine rush of the controller. That's exciting, and it's a vicious negative cycle. So you start out it starts out good because you're trying to do good for the person, but then it somehow goes to shit.